The cold wind swept across the cliffs of Arendor, carrying with it the scent of the sea and the promise of storms. Lady Seraphine stood at the edge, her dark hair whipping around her face, her sharp eyes fixed on the horizon where the enemy lands of Valamor lay. She felt her chest tighten as she remembered the words of her mother, Queen Alara, only hours before. "You will marry him, Seraphine. The future of our kingdom depends on it." Seraphine had always believed in freedom, in choice, in forging her own destiny. She had trained in the arts of diplomacy and swordsmanship. She had ridden through forests and crossed rivers, and yet here she was, to be given to a boy from the kingdom her own blood had fought against for decades. Her hands clenched at her sides. She hated the thought of him, of her forced marriage, but she could not disobey her mother. The queen's will was law, and war was no friend to defiance. The castle halls of Arendor were silent as Seraphine was escorted to her carriage. Servants bowed their heads, whispers trailing behind her like shadows. The journey to Valamor was long, through forests where the trees seemed to lean closer as if listening to her thoughts. Seraphine stared out the window at the moon rising pale and full, casting silver light over the dark canopy. Her heart pounded. This was not just a marriage. It was a surrender of her heart, her trust, and her very self to an unknown enemy. Upon arriving at Valamor, the castle loomed over her like a giant of stone and shadow. Its towers pierced the night sky, glowing faintly under the moonlight, giving the impression that the building itself was alive. She was led through echoing corridors lined with banners depicting her family's sworn enemy, their symbols stark against the walls. Seraphine's stomach twisted. How could she ever feel safe here? And then she saw him. Prince Kaelin of Valamor stood in the great hall, tall and composed, his dark hair falling slightly over his forehead, eyes that seemed to capture the moonlight and hold it within their depths. He was quiet, his gaze unreadable, yet it carried weight. Seraphine felt a shiver, though she did not know if it was from fear, anticipation, or something else entirely. He was handsome, yes, but more than that. He radiated a power she could feel even across the vast hall. A power she could not yet name. "Lady Seraphine," he said softly, his voice smooth, calm, and somehow commanding. "Welcome to Valamor." She nodded stiffly. "Prince Kaelin." Her words felt hollow, polite, distant. She did not smile. Smiling was a luxury she did not allow herself. Not here. Not now. The ceremony was held in the moonlit courtyard, surrounded by walls that had witnessed generations of kings and queens. Candles flickered in their holders, casting long shadows on the stone. Priests spoke words she barely heard, their chants blending with the soft wind. And when Kaelin extended his hand, she felt the pull of destiny, a quiet tug in her chest that made her hesitate. She took it, her fingers brushing his. A spark, almost imperceptible, passed between them. The moment passed, and the world seemed to settle into silence. But Seraphine could not shake the feeling that the night had shifted, that something was watching, waiting, something old and ancient tied to the moon above. She turned her gaze skyward. The silver light bathed the courtyard, illuminating Kaelin in a way that made him almost otherworldly. Kaelin himself seemed restless. Though his face was calm, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Seraphine noticed the faint tremor, a subtle tension in his shoulders. It was unlike the confident posture of a prince, and yet he radiated control, like a coiled storm. That night, Seraphine was led to her chambers, a room lavish yet cold, with walls of polished stone and a bed draped in velvet. She sat on the edge listening to the sounds of the castle, the creak of wooden beams, the distant howls of wolves in the surrounding forests, and the echo of her own heartbeat. Sleep eluded her. A soft knock came at the door. Seraphine turned, expecting a servant, but instead Kaelin entered. The room seemed to shrink in his presence, and the moonlight caught his features, highlighting his sharp jaw and the intensity of his eyes. "I hope you are not afraid," he said quietly. "I am not," she replied, though her voice wavered. "I am cautious, yes, but not afraid." He studied her, his expression unreadable. "Good, you should be cautious. The world we live in, it is not kind to those who are careless." There was a pause, heavy and filled with unspoken thoughts. The room seemed charged, the moonlight pouring in like a river of silver over them both. Then something strange happened. The light outside brightened suddenly, a beam sharper than the ordinary glow of the moon. Kaelin's body stiffened and his eyes flickered with a strange luminescence. Before Seraphine could speak, his figure blurred, shadows stretching and twisting until where a man had stood, a great silver wolf now crouched. Its eyes glowed like molten silver, intelligent and piercing. Seraphine froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. The creature regarded her as if measuring her soul, its chest rising and falling with a powerful rhythm. And then just as suddenly, Kaelin's human form returned, standing once more before her, calm, composed, as if nothing had happened. "You saw it," he said quietly, almost a whisper. Seraphine could only nod, her throat dry, her mind racing. What are you?" Kaelin looked at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "What the moon chooses me to be, and now, you know the truth." The words sent a shiver down her spine. The moon above, serene and eternal, seemed to pulse in response, casting light over both of them. Seraphine realized in that moment that the man she had been forced to marry was not simply her enemy. He was something far greater, far more dangerous and far more fascinating. She began, but her words faltered. "You will have time," he said, stepping closer yet not invading her space. "Time to understand me. To understand what we are now bound to." She looked at him, and for the first time she felt something unfamiliar. A pull, subtle yet undeniable. Fear intertwined with curiosity. Resentment mixed with fascination. She did not trust him, not fully, but she felt a quiet awareness that her life, her heart, and her destiny had shifted irrevocably. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the windows and carrying the scent of the forests beyond. A distant howl answered as if in acknowledgement. Seraphine's heart pounded, a mix of dread and excitement. The moon above seemed to shine brighter, its silver glow reflecting in Kaelin's eyes. That night, sleep did not come easily. Seraphine lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the strange transformation she had witnessed. Kaelin, the prince, the enemy, the alpha, he was no ordinary man, and yet she felt the spark of a connection, faint but undeniable, weaving between them. The castle was quiet, the corridors empty, but shadows moved where they should not, and whispers floated in the air like secrets too old to remember. Seraphine understood with a clarity that chilled her, that she had entered a world larger than politics, larger than kingdoms, larger than fear itself, and in the heart of that world, Kaelin waited, silent, powerful, chosen by the moon. The night stretched on, the silver light painting the walls of her chamber. Seraphine felt the weight of the future pressing on her shoulders, heavy and unyielding. She did not know if she could trust the man she was forced to marry, nor did she know if he could control the power within him. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. And far away, hidden in the forest shadows, eyes watched the castle. Eyes that had waited for the moon chosen to appear. The game was beginning. The first night of their forced union ended with tension, fear, and the promise of destiny. Seraphine lay awake, heart thrumming with uncertainty, and knew that the coming days would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. For the moon had chosen Kaelin. And now, Seraphine was bound to him in ways she did not yet understand. And with that thought, a distant, haunting howl echoed through the night, sending a shiver down her spine. The morning after the moonlit wedding brought a heavy quiet over Valamore Castle. Sunlight spilled across the stone floors, but it seemed weaker here, as though the shadows of the night still lingered. Lady Seraphine dressed quickly, her mind unable to focus on the ornate gown or delicate jewelry. Instead, her thoughts were filled with Kaelin, the prince who had transformed into the moon-chosen alpha. The memory of his glowing eyes and the silvery wolf that had appeared before her haunted her, both terrifying and mesmerizing. Seraphine walked through the halls of the castle, trying to act as if nothing had happened, though every glance from a guard or servant reminded her that she was the daughter of her kingdom, a foreigner in an enemy land. Whispers followed her like shadows, soft and uncertain. "The princess is not afraid," one servant muttered. "She's too proud." She ignored them and climbed to the balcony overlooking the forest. The trees swayed under the morning breeze, and she could see the distant mountains of Arendor, her homeland. She clenched her fists. Every part of her wanted to run back, to escape this forced marriage, but duty weighed heavier than fear. She had no choice. Kaelin approached silently, his presence barely audible yet impossible to ignore. "You are awake early," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of something Seraphine could not yet name. "I could say the same for you," she replied, keeping her tone measured. She did not want to show weakness, though the memories of last night's transformation still flickered in her mind like firelight. Kaelin leaned against the railing beside her, eyes scanning the horizon. "The night did not go unnoticed," he said. His gaze darkened. "The moon chose me for a reason, Seraphine, and now it has chosen you to be tied to me." She frowned. "Tied to you? I am not sure I understand what that means." Kaelin's lips curved into a small, enigmatic smile. "You will. Soon enough. The moon's power does not bind only the chosen. It binds the hearts and destinies around them. You feel it too, whether you admit it or not." Seraphine's heart thudded. She wanted to argue, to say it was just fear or confusion, but she could not deny the strange pull she had felt last night. The way the air seemed heavier with him nearby, the way the castle itself felt alive when he moved. Before she could respond, the sound of distant howls echoed through the forest, low and warning. Kaelin's posture shifted instantly, alert, tense. Seraphine saw the change, the subtle tightening of muscles, the way his eyes darkened with focus. "They are near," he said softly. "The wolves." "They sense the moon chosen." "The wolves?" she asked, startled. Kaelin's gaze met hers, calm yet intense. "Not ordinary wolves. They are bound to me. Guardians, watchers of the forest, connected to the Alpha's blood. They will come if danger arises." Seraphine swallowed hard. Danger, the wolves, and the transformation. Her imagination raced. She wanted to be afraid, but part of her could not help but be fascinated. The man she had been forced to marry was more than a prince. He was something ancient, powerful, and perhaps dangerous. The morning passed slowly, filled with lessons she did not wish to learn. Servants, knights, and advisors moved around her, each bowing with careful respect. Kaelin did not leave her side, though he spoke little. There was a weight to his silence, a sense that he was watching not just her but everything beyond the castle walls. Seraphine felt the tension growing, the unspoken danger that always lingered near him. By afternoon, the castle gates opened to welcome a delegation from Arendor. Seraphine's mother had sent them. Officials who spoke of diplomacy and trust, though every word carried an edge of warning. Seraphine could not shake the feeling that she was both pawn and protector, caught in a game larger than herself. Kaelin observed the delegation with sharp eyes, listening and nodding, yet Seraphine sensed he was aware of more than the words exchanged. He was listening to the wind, the forest, even the unspoken intentions hidden in the courtiers' gestures. When the delegation left, Kaelin led Seraphine to the castle library, a vast room lined with books and ancient scrolls. Dust floated in the sunlight and the air smelled of parchment and time. "You need to understand the history of your new home," Kaelin said quietly. "And the history of the moon's alpha." Seraphine looked at him, puzzled. "History? I am not sure what this has to do with me." Kaelin pulled a large, leather-bound book from the shelf and set it on the table. Its pages were filled with drawings of wolves, kings, and celestial symbols. The moon-chosen Alpha appears once in a generation. He wields power over beasts and shadows. His strength can unite kingdoms or destroy them. I am that Alpha. Seraphine stared at him, the words sinking slowly. "And the moon. It binds you to me?" Kaelin nodded. "The bond is not yet clear, but it is there. I felt it the moment we touched, and you. You will feel it stronger with time. That is why you must learn. You must understand the power you are tied to." The room grew colder as he spoke. Shadows stretched along the walls, moving as though alive. Seraphine shivered, not from cold, but from a strange awareness that the castle itself seemed to listen. She did not know what to say. The man she had married was more than human, more than enemy. And yet she felt the stirrings of curiosity, even trust. The Alpha before her was powerful, yes, but also burdened. He carried a weight she could sense, a loneliness hidden beneath calm composure. Hours passed in silence as they pored over scrolls and texts. Seraphine learned of the moon's cycles, the legends of the Alpha, and the ancient wolves who served as guardians. The more she learned, the more she realized that her forced marriage was not just a political move. It was a key to powers and destinies older than either kingdom. When the sun began to set, casting orange and purple light across the stone floors, Kaelin rose. "There are things in this castle you have yet to see," he said. "Things that will test your courage and your heart. You may not trust me yet, but trust that the world we are in is larger than politics or war." Before she could respond, a sudden commotion erupted outside. Shouts echoed from the courtyards and the sound of metal clashing rang through the castle walls. Kalen's expression hardened and he moved with a speed that seemed impossible. Seraphine ran to the window. Outside, a group of cloaked figures had entered the castle grounds. They moved with stealth and purpose, their eyes locked on the gates. She recognized the banners. They were agents from Arendor, sent to assassinate Kalen before the moon could fully claim him. Fear rose in her chest, but so did determination. She had seen the power he wielded, and she would not let him die even if he was her enemy. Without thinking, she grabbed a nearby candle holder and rushed toward the courtyard. Kalen appeared at her side, his presence commanding and steady. The moonlight shone down, casting his figure in silver. His eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time she felt a bond, a silent understanding. "Stay close," he said. The cloaked figures advanced, but Kalen did not hesitate. With a swift movement, he summoned the wolves from the surrounding forests. They emerged from the shadows, eyes glowing silver, their snarls echoing through the night. The assassins froze, unprepared for the creatures bound to the moon-chosen alpha. Seraphine felt a thrill, a mixture of fear and awe. Kalen moved like a shadow, calm, precise, and terrifyingly powerful. She realized that the stories of the moon-chosen were no myth. He was real, and she was tied to him in ways that could change everything. As the wolves surrounded the intruders, Kalen glanced at Seraphine. "You did not need to act," he said softly, though there was no anger in his voice. "Yet you did. That is why you are here. Why destiny has brought us together." Her heart pounded, and she realized he was right. She had acted without fear, without hesitation, because in some corner of her being she trusted him, perhaps not fully, but enough to risk herself. When the intruders were driven off, Kalen turned to her, his expression unreadable but intense. "You are braver than you know," he said, "and more important than you realize." Seraphine looked at him, her own fear mingling with a strange fascination. She wanted to ask him everything, to demand answers, but the moment passed. The moonlight shone down, and she understood that this night, this castle, and this man were the beginning of a story far larger than either of them. As she returned to her chambers, the memory of the wolves, the clash, and Kalen's eyes burned in her mind. She knew without doubt that her life had changed forever. She was no longer just a princess of Arendor. She was part of the destiny of the moon-chosen Alpha. And far outside in the forest, unseen eyes watched. The game was far from over, and the forces of shadow stirred with every beat of the moon's light. The moon hung high over Valamore Castle, casting silver light that spilled across the stone walls and the dark forest beyond. Lady Seraphine sat by the balcony, her hands folded in her lap, staring into the shadows where the trees swayed like restless spirits. Even after the chaos of the assassination attempt, sleep had eluded her. Her mind was filled with Kalen, his eyes, his words, and the strange, powerful presence that seemed to pulse around him like the moon's own heartbeat. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. Kalen stepped onto the balcony, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His dark hair caught the moonlight, giving him an almost ethereal glow. Even without speaking, his presence made her heart quicken. "The night is calm," he said softly, though his voice carried an edge that hinted at storms. "Calm," she repeated, though her voice was uncertain, if one ignores the shadows lurking in the forest. Kalen's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Shadows are not always enemies. Some are only waiting for the right time." Seraphine looked at him, puzzled. "You speak as if the world itself has a mind." "In some ways it does," he replied, turning to face her. His eyes glimmered in the moonlight. The moon, the forest, the wolves, they all listen, all feel, all act. They respond to the Alpha. She shivered, not from cold, but from the weight of his words. The man she had been forced to marry was no ordinary prince. He was part of something older, something far beyond her understanding. Yet even as fear and awe tangled in her chest, she felt the pull of curiosity, a quiet fascination that refused to be ignored. "You have seen what I am capable of," Kalen said quietly, stepping closer. "And yet you act without hesitation. You saved me, Seraphine. That shows courage, and a bond we cannot deny." Seraphine's eyes widened. "A bond?" Kalen nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "Yes, the moon binds more than just the chosen. It touches those who are destined to stand beside them. You felt it the moment we touched." She remembered the brush of his fingers, the spark that had passed between them. Fear had been there, yes, but beneath it had been something else. something she could not yet name. Now under the moon's glow, she understood that it was more than coincidence. Destiny had drawn them together. Before she could speak, a soft rustle came from the forest below. Kalen's eyes darkened, sharp and alert. "They are near," he said, his voice low. "The guardians of the forest, or perhaps watchers of those who do not belong." Seraphine felt a thrill of fear and excitement. "Do we face them?" Kalen shook his head. "Not yet. We must understand them first. The forest does not act without reason, neither should we." The night stretched on as they moved through the castle, exploring corridors Seraphine had not seen before. Kalen spoke little, but his words carried weight, teaching her about the moon's cycles, the alpha's duties, and the ancient connection between beast and human. Every step she took beside him, every whispered explanation made the castle feel alive in ways she had never imagined. Hours later, they reached the outer courtyard, bathed in silver moonlight. Wolves padded silently around the edges, eyes glowing, ears alert. Seraphine felt a shiver run through her as Kalen knelt, placing his hand on the stone. The wolves approached, their movements graceful, almost reverent. "They sense me," Kalen said quietly. "And now they sense you too. You are part of this, Seraphine, part of the bond." Seraphine knelt beside him, her hands trembling. The wolves circled them, sniffing, observing, yet showing no aggression. One stepped closer, head tilting as if judging her. She held her breath, meeting its eyes, and felt a strange connection, as if the creature could see her heart. "You are brave," Kalen whispered, "and the moon has not given me this bond lightly. You are needed, more than you know." Her chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to understand everything, but words felt inadequate. The pull between them was stronger than her fear, stronger than the night itself. She realized with a quiet awe that she was beginning to trust him, not fully, perhaps, but enough to believe that together they could face whatever came next. A sudden movement in the shadows made both of them tense. From the edge of the courtyard, a dark figure emerged, moving with grace and purpose. Kalen's eyes narrowed, and the wolves growled softly, their fur bristling. Seraphine's heart pounded as the figure stepped into the moonlight. It was not human. Its eyes glowed faintly, and shadows seemed to cling to it, twisting around its form. Kalen rose, his presence commanding, and the air seemed to thrum with energy. "This is no ordinary foe," he said, voice low but steady. "Stay behind me." Seraphine did not move. Something within her urged her forward, curiosity stronger than fear. Kalen noticed and raised an eyebrow. "Do not, unless you are prepared for what follows." "I am prepared," she said. Though her voice was steadier than she felt, the shadowy figure advanced, and Kalen's hand moved almost instinctively, summoning a silver light from the moon above. The wolves flanked him, eyes glowing, teeth bared in silent warning. Seraphine felt the power of the night pressing in, raw and alive, and knew that this was only a glimpse of the dangers tied to Kalen's alpha destiny. The figure stopped, observing them, its presence almost like a test. Kalen's eyes met Seraphine's, and in that moment she understood. Their bond was not just for protection. It was trust, unity, and something deeper, something neither of them fully understood yet, but which would shape the battles and choices to come. Finally, the figure bowed slightly, disappearing into the shadows as silently as it had appeared. Kalen lowered his hand, the moonlight fading from his fingers, and the wolves relaxed. "Not all who are dangerous seek to harm," he said, turning to her. "But this was a warning. Forces beyond our understanding are stirring, and they are aware of you now, Seraphine. A part of you is now woven into this world, whether you accept it or not." Her heart raced. I do not know if I am ready for this world." Kalen stepped closer, his presence both comforting and overwhelming. "You are ready because the moon has chosen you to be here, and because you are stronger than you realize. Trust yourself, as you must trust me." The air between them seemed to hum, heavy with the unspoken tension of danger, destiny, and something more intimate, more profound. Seraphine felt her chest tighten, realizing that fear and fascination were intertwined. She was no longer simply a princess forced into marriage. She was part of a bond older than kingdoms, one that could change the course of history. Kalen's gaze softened, and for a moment she saw vulnerability there, a weight he carried alone. "You will see my world," he said quietly. "And you will understand that the moon's choice is not merely about power, it is about trust, courage, and heart." You have all three, Seraphine. That is why you are here. She met his eyes, her own resolve growing. The night was dangerous, the forces unseen, but she felt a strange determination. She would not be afraid, not completely, not when destiny itself had placed her by Kaelin's side. The rest of the night passed in quiet preparation. Kaelin taught her how to sense the forest, how to read the subtle movements of creatures, and how to feel the pulse of the moon in the air. Seraphine listened, learning not only with her mind but with her heart. The more she understood, the more she realized that the world she had entered was vast, alive, and more wondrous than she had ever imagined. As dawn approached, the first light touching the towers of Valmore, Kaelin stood beside her once more, gazing at the horizon. "The night has tested you," he said softly, "and you have passed. But the true trials are yet to come. Shadows are moving, forces will awaken, and soon we will both be called upon to act." Seraphine nodded, her pulse steadying. She understood now that fear was only one part of the journey. Courage, curiosity, and trust would guide her. And perhaps somewhere in that journey she would discover something she had never known before. The strange, forbidden pull of her heart toward the moon-chosen Alpha. The sun rose, bathing the castle in gold, but Seraphine's eyes remained on the silver light of the receding moon. Something had shifted in the night, in Kaelin and in her own heart, and she knew with a certainty both thrilling and terrifying that their bond was only beginning. From the shadows of the forest, silent eyes watched. Forces of darkness and magic stirred, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The game had only just begun. The forest surrounding Valamore Castle seemed alive in a way Seraphine had never noticed before. Even in daylight, shadows clung to the edges of trees, moving as though stirred by an invisible wind. Birds called, their cries sharp and uncertain, and the scent of earth and wildflowers mingled with the faint metallic tang of magic in the air. Seraphine walked beside Kaelin, her steps careful on the uneven path. The moon-chosen Alpha moved with a quiet confidence, his dark eyes scanning the surroundings, ears tuned to sounds she could barely hear. She felt both awe and unease, realizing that every step they took in this forest was a step deeper into a world of forces she could not yet understand. "Why have we come here?" she asked, keeping her voice low. "The forest, it feels alive." Kaelin's gaze softened briefly. "Because the forest tests those who are tied to the Alpha. It responds to courage, truth, and the heart. You are part of this, Seraphine. You must learn to feel it, not just see it." She frowned, unsure how to understand. "Feel it?" Kaelin stopped and knelt beside a fallen log, motioning for her to do the same. "Close your eyes, listen, not to the birds, not to the wind. Listen to the pulse beneath it all. The heartbeat of the forest and the pull of the moon." Seraphine obeyed, closing her eyes. At first all she heard were ordinary sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant babble of a stream. Then slowly she became aware of something deeper, something steady and rhythmic, a vibration in the air almost like a pulse that seemed to echo within her chest. It was subtle, faint yet undeniably there, the forest. "It speaks," she whispered, amazed. Kaelin nodded. "And it will guide you if you are willing to trust it. The Alpha's bond is not only power, it is awareness, perception, and connection. You are tied to that now, Seraphine, and that is why you are here." Her pulse quickened. The forest felt both welcoming and dangerous, like a living entity with its own will. She realized that the world Kaelin inhabited was vast, complex, and unforgiving. Every shadow could hide a threat, or a test. Hours passed as they moved deeper into the woods. Kaelin taught her to sense subtle changes, the shift in wind, the rustle of hidden creatures, the faint traces of magic that lingered in the air. Seraphine struggled at first, but with each step, each lesson, she felt herself becoming more aware, more attuned to the forces that surrounded them. Then, without warning, a sudden cry pierced the forest. It was sharp, desperate, and human. Seraphine's heart leapt. "Someone is in trouble," she said. Kaelin's expression hardened. "Follow me quietly. The forest will protect us if we respect it." They moved swiftly, the wolves of Valamore silently appearing at their sides, blending with the shadows. Seraphine felt her fear mingling with excitement. This was no longer a lesson. It was a test of courage, instinct, and trust. They came to a clearing where a young messenger from Arendor had been trapped by dark vines that seemed to writhe and move like snakes. The boy struggled, fear etched across his face. Kaelin stepped forward, raising his hand, and the vines recoiled from the power that radiated from him. Seraphine watched in awe as he freed the boy with a few controlled movements, his voice low, speaking words that seemed to calm the forest itself. The messenger stumbled forward, fear giving way to relief. "Thank you." "My lord," he stammered. Kaelin nodded briefly. "Return to your kingdom and speak truth. The forest will watch and it will remember." Seraphine's eyes were wide with admiration. She had seen Kaelin's power before, but this display was different. Controlled, precise, and yet filled with something ancient and unstoppable. The moon-chosen Alpha was not just a warrior, he was a force of nature. As they continued through the forest, Seraphine felt the bond between them deepen. Every shared glance, every brush of hands as they passed through thick foliage, seemed to pull them closer. She realized that the attraction she had tried to ignore was no longer subtle. It was impossible to deny. Yet, along with fascination, fear lingered. Kaelin's world was dangerous, filled with shadows and forces she could barely comprehend. She could not help but wonder if she was truly ready for what lay ahead. Suddenly the forest darkened as a thick mist rolled in, swirling around their feet and climbing up the trees. The air grew colder, heavier. Seraphine shivered. "What is this?" she asked. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. "A test. The forest is alive with magic. It senses doubt, fear, and hesitation. We must move carefully." They pressed forward, but the mist thickened, twisting into shapes that seemed almost human. Whispers echoed around them, voices they could not understand, speaking in a language older than kingdoms. Seraphine felt a chill run down her spine. One of the shadowy figures separated from the mist, revealing a creature cloaked in darkness, eyes glinting like shards of glass. It moved with unnatural grace, circling them. Kaelin stepped in front of Seraphine, his presence commanding. "Do not fear," he whispered, though his eyes never left the creature. "It tests us, seeks to understand who we are. We must prove our strength. Together." The creature lunged, and Kaelin moved with lightning speed, summoning a silver light from the moon above. The wolves circled, teeth bared, growls low and warning. Seraphine felt her heart race. Fear and exhilaration tangled in a dizzying mixture. Kaelin's hand brushed against hers as he moved, and in that moment, she felt the bond fully. It was not just trust, it was connection, power, and understanding. The Alpha's presence was overwhelming yet comforting, and she realized that she was not just beside him in this moment. She was part of him, part of the force that shaped their destiny. The creature recoiled, then vanished into the mist, leaving only silence in its wake. Seraphine's chest heaved with relief and awe. She looked at Kaelin, seeing the weight of responsibility etched in his features. You controlled it," she whispered. Kaelin nodded. "The Alpha's power is not only strength. It is control, wisdom, and heart. And now you are part of that. You are learning to see, to feel, and to stand beside me." She realized with a quiet certainty that this bond was unlike anything she had ever known. Fear, fascination, and something deeper, an unspoken pull, wove through every glance, every touch, every shared heartbeat. She could not deny it, nor did she wish to. They emerged from the forest as dawn broke, the mist lifting and sunlight touching the treetops. Seraphine felt a sense of accomplishment, but also a lingering unease. The world outside was not safe, and their bond would be tested again and again. Kaelin placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm yet gentle. "You have done well," he said quietly, "but the trials are only beginning. Forces beyond our understanding are stirring, and soon, you will face decisions that will test your courage, your heart, and your loyalty." Seraphine met his gaze, her own resolve strengthening. She had learned much, but she knew the journey was far from over. The pull she felt toward Kaelin, the Alpha, the Moon-chosen, was dangerous, thrilling, and undeniable. And she understood that trust and courage would be the only guides in the darkness to come. As they returned to the castle, the first rays of sunlight touched the towers, illuminating the stone in gold. Yet Seraphine's eyes remained on the shadows, remembering the mist, the whispers, and the unseen forces that had watched them. The forest, the moon, the Alpha, they were all part of a story larger than herself. And she was now bound to it, heart and soul. Unseen in the distant hills, eyes watched. Forces of shadow and magic stirred, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The bond between Seraphine and Kaelin was no longer hidden, and the game was far from over. The night settled over Valamore Castle with a heavy, almost sacred stillness. Moonlight bathed the towers, reflecting off the stone walls and illuminating the forest beyond. Lady Seraphine stood on the balcony, her hands gripping the railing, her thoughts restless. This night felt different from any before. She could sense it in the air, the tension of fate, the pull of destiny, and the weight of the bond that tied her to Kalen, the moon-chosen alpha. Kalen appeared silently beside her, as if the shadows themselves had delivered him. His dark eyes reflected the silver light, and his presence carried both strength and something deeper, an unspoken promise. A connection neither time nor distance could sever. "They are moving," Kalen said softly, his gaze sweeping the forest. "The forces I warned you about. They are gathering, drawn by the bond we share." Seraphine nodded, her chest tight with a mix of fear and resolve. "Then we face them together?" Kalen's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. "Together, that is the only way." They descended into the courtyard, the wolves of Valamore emerging from the shadows to flank them. The air felt alive, buzzing with anticipation, and Seraphine felt the pull of the moon stronger than ever. It was as though the very earth beneath them recognized the gravity of the coming night. From the forest's edge, dark figures began to appear. Not all were human. Some were twisted shapes, shadows given form, drawn to the Alpha's power. Seraphine's heart pounded, but she stayed close to Kalen, feeling his calm strength flow into her. Kalen raised his hand, silver light emanating from his palm, illuminating the courtyard and revealing the full extent of their adversaries. The Alpha's power radiated outward, a quiet but undeniable force that seemed to shape the air itself. The creatures hesitated, sensing both danger and authority. "Stay close," Kalen whispered, eyes locking onto hers. "Remember what you've learned. Trust the forest, trust the wolves, trust the bond." Seraphine nodded. Fear was present, yes, but it was tempered by a growing confidence. She had trained, learned, and felt the pulse of the forest, the moon, and the Alpha's power coursing through her. She understood, finally, that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. The shadowy forces surged forward, and Kalen moved with a precision and grace that seemed almost unnatural. Wolves leapt, their growls echoing, teeth flashing in the moonlight. Silver light sliced through the darkness, cutting a path for them to stand firm. Seraphine followed, moving instinctively, her senses sharper than ever. She felt the rhythm of the fight, the ebb and flow of power around them, and a fierce clarity filled her mind. One of the shadows lunged at her, and instinctively she sidestepped, raising her hands as Kalen's light shielded them both. Her pulse raced, but she no longer felt helpless. This was their battle, their trial, and she was a part of it. Together they formed a bond stronger than fear, a force that even the shadows could not ignore. As the battle raged, Kalen glanced at her, a rare softness in his gaze. "You are more than I expected," he said quietly, his voice carrying over the chaos. "You are strong, brave, and tied to this destiny as surely as I am." Seraphine felt a warmth in her chest, a surge of courage and connection that went beyond words. She realized with a quiet awe that this bond, born of moonlight, courage, and shared destiny, was not just survival. It was trust, understanding, and something deeper, a heart intertwined with the Alphas. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of silver light, shadows, and the rhythmic growls of wolves. Finally, the last of the shadowed figures dissolved into the mist, retreating, unwilling or unable to withstand the force of the Alpha and his bonded companion. Seraphine's chest heaved with relief, and she felt the weight of exhaustion, triumph, and awe settle over her. Kalen stepped closer, his hand brushing hers, and for the first time, the full intensity of their bond struck her. Not just as a connection of destiny, but as something deeply personal, intimate, and unbreakable. "You have faced this night well," he said softly. "The bond has been tested, and it has held." Seraphine looked into his eyes, her own heart beating faster. I never knew I could be like this," she whispered. "Strong, brave, connected." Kalen smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and something gentler, warmer. "You were always capable. You simply had to trust yourself and trust me." The moon rose higher, silver light spilling over them, and Seraphine felt a calm she had never known. The forest, the castle, the wolves, all seemed to hum with approval, as if the world itself acknowledged that this bond was real, powerful, and destined. For a long moment, they stood in silence, hands brushing, hearts racing in unison. The air was thick with unspoken words, feelings neither had yet fully expressed but both understood. Trust, courage, and a quiet yearning flowed between them, binding them more tightly than any chain or decree could. Kalen finally spoke, his voice low and tender. "The world will challenge us again, Seraphine. Shadows will rise, powers will awaken, and we will be tested. But we are ready, together. The Alpha is not alone, and neither are you." She nodded, feeling a sense of completeness she had never imagined possible. She realized that her fear of this forced marriage, of destiny, of the unknown, had been replaced by a fierce determination to stand beside him, to embrace the trials, and to honor the bond that had grown between them. "Then we face it," she said quietly but firmly. "Together." Kalen's eyes softened, and for the first time the weight he carried seemed lighter, shared with someone who understood. "Together," he echoed. They returned to the castle hand in hand, the wolves following silently, guardians of both the night and their bond. Seraphine's thoughts drifted to the journey that had brought her here, from a princess forced into marriage, to a bonded companion of the moon-chosen Alpha, to someone who had faced fear, darkness, and destiny itself. She realized that her life had changed forever, not because of duty alone, but because of courage, trust, and the pull of something extraordinary. In the quiet of her chambers, Seraphine stood by the window, watching the moonlight shimmer across the stone towers. Kalen appeared beside her once more, his presence calm and protective. "The trials of night have passed," he said softly. "But the journey is only beginning. There will be more challenges, more choices, and more truths to uncover. Yet whatever comes, we face it as one." She felt a warmth in her chest, a lightness that contrasted the heavy shadow she had felt for so long. "I am ready," she said, meeting his gaze. "With you, I am ready for anything." Kalen's hand found hers, fingers intertwining, and the bond between them pulsed, almost visible in the silver moonlight. "Then destiny has chosen well," he said, "and the moon has brought us together for a reason beyond kingdoms or shadows. You are my equal, my companion, and the heart I did not know I needed." Seraphine's breath caught, her eyes reflecting the glow of the moon. She understood now that fear had been only the beginning. Courage, trust, and love were the forces that truly shaped their path. And in that moment, she embraced it all, the danger, the destiny, and the man who had become her Alpha, her protector and her partner in fate. Outside, the forest was silent once more, the wolves resting, the shadows receding. But the world remained vast, alive, and full of mystery. Seraphine knew there would be more trials, more tests of courage and heart. Yet she also knew that whatever darkness rose, they would face it together, bound by trust, destiny, and the unbreakable pull of the moon-chosen Alpha. As the first light of dawn touched the towers, Seraphine felt a sense of peace, rare and profound. She realized that she had been transformed, not just by the magic of the moon or the bond with Kalen, but by the journey itself. The princess forced into marriage had become a woman who understood courage, love, and the power of destiny. Kalen's voice broke the silence, soft but certain. "Rest now. The future is ours to face, and together we will shape it no matter what shadows come." Seraphine smiled, a quiet, steady smile. "Together," she repeated. The moon lingered above Valamore Castle, a silent witness to their bond, their courage, and their love. And for the first time, Seraphine understood that destiny was not a burden, but a path illuminated by trust, heart, and the power of the moon-chosen Alpha.